because of previous usage, but I still do wonder if they're too close together. Wouldn't it be more ideal to have them a little bit farther back, like perhaps before Center Street, rather than, and I don't know from the map, I think there's another location. So these are the two new ones?
That's correct. Mm-hmm. Is there one there in front of the courthouse? No?
Looks like there's already one in terms of the courthouse.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So, I always, signs are a wonderful thing. They can muddy the aesthetics of a downtown, having helped write sign ordinances before. But if I'm the only one that have comments on that.
I think you can overdo it with signs, and there's so much competing signage in downtown Northampton. I would want to see very frugal new additions.
Is the college going to bankroll their signs and the relocation of the city's signs?
Well, I guess there would be the one, BPW had offered to relocate the crosswalk sign to more, to what they felt was a more effective location. And that's the only sign that would, I'm sorry, and then they also, I believe, had offered to move the right lane, must turn right sign, because they felt it was an improvement. Nice to see the lane lines.
Just put ish, put right-ish. Just one minor observation, that particular sign that's on the front there is 4 feet in height. It's larger than the others.
All right.
12 inches.
So, do you? What's the pleasure of the board? Would you like to vote on this as a group or individually, or do you feel prepared to vote?
I'd like to know what our role here is. Do we vote?
Okay.
Signs?
Well, we had this tourism directional sign policy, but this really doesn't apply to it because those are the big blue ones. That this is more attuned to Smith campus. We have permitted signs in the past by Smith and also other wayfaring signs in the city, especially downtown, for some directions. I still haven't figured out how the KOA got their signs all over the city, but they are. I think it was a midnight raid. So, in the past, the board has approved signage like this.
Group, individual.
I could approve them as a group.
Okay, so we need a motion then.
Move to approve. Second.
4 feet, that sounds like a huge sign. Does that?
It does to me, and I'm thinking the one.
How big is the existing one there, the right lane must turn right?
Even this one right in front of.
I know, that seems huge.
See, that's 3 feet, approximately.
That's the same size as
This
this.
one, yeah.
And I think it may not be quite as wide, but
Those seem overly large and out of scale for that location.
it's essentially right in front of Broadside and Green Bean.
Is that what they would really look like? Is that visual representation the actual scale?
It would be to scale, yeah. And I think probably the designer is using that size for it to be effective.
See, I think that one in front of Green Bean is somewhat redundant because there's Smith College right in front of you.
Well, you know that's there. And this is for first-time visitors.
Other people do too, because I've just seen it at the courthouse. There's another sign at the courthouse.
Can I make a comment?
We have a civilian who'd like to speak, yes.
Well, I would just like to say, and of course I will admit that I am an Ada, so I did go to Smith, but being a parent, and I'm sure many of you here have all done it, going to visit colleges and trying to find the colleges and looking for signs, I think that having a sign, would be very helpful for, and we all know where it is, but I'm telling you, when I go to look at other colleges, when I have, and they don't have enough signage, and you feel like, am I lost? Am I, you know, I think it's nice to have the sign, but, sorry.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I would emphasize is this is for first time, this is geared towards first time visitors.
And I guess that before we make, I just wonder with GPS and Google Map being so prevalent in terms of, you know, I also have college age kids that have taken off college and they Google it and GPS it and rely heavily on that. Signs are always welcome once you get close, especially one that says admission, you know, but, and athletics. But,
Yeah, not quite. I
I'm
mean,
feeling mixed about making
I
a
am too.
decision
They
about
seem
this.
big, and I don't know
They seem
if
big
you need
and-
2 in a row there.
And I'm still hung up about moving one of our signs so that they can have the spot where our sign is, when we could just put their sign where our sign is going to go. I can't get past that. And I say that as the husband of an Ada and the son of 2 faculty members of Smith. So, you know, I mean, Smith's near and dear to my heart, but I don't feel like playing musical signs. So.
I audited a class once.
I can spell Smith.
Can we, it feels like we need a little time to sort of mull it over, so I'm not sure that I'm ready to make a decision. I'd like to get down there and sort of see something scale size on the street.
David, would you be willing to withdraw your motion for
Yes.
now and perhaps a motion to table for a week?
Sure.
Or,
I'd like to make a motion that we table the decision until our next board meeting.
Second.
further discussion? All in favor of that?
Aye.
Alright.
Great. Yeah.
So question, what do you expect to be able to see in the next 2 weeks? Are you looking for a demonstration of a piece of cardboard out there in the size of a 2x4? I mean,
Yeah, that'd be,
I'm not sure what you're looking for
That
and
may be what that
how to
is.
coordinate
think
that
that-
with
that's-
Smith College and Laura Hanson to have an actual, not a presentation, but something out there that people could see.
could you make would it be practical to make a board that looks like the sign and you just stick it up there?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, is it something that you want to meet on site? You know, kind of like conferences? I mean, how are you going to, you each individually coming out to look at it? Are you coming out as a group? I mean, there's some coordination that would need to take. Yeah, that's going to take some
I think this
coordination.
is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go down to Route 91, put my Google Map on and see how it tells me to get to Smith College. I'm gonna then drive that route. And then I will come back and I'll drive the Pleasant Street route and up Main Street to take a look at the signage there. And then I personally will take responsibility for measuring out something that's 4 by 2,
2.5.
2.5, and having one of my kids hold it up as I drive up the street and see whether or not I feel like.
How tall is your
That's
child?
commitment.
She's 5'11".
Yeah, she's probably going to need a ladder to get it into position.
I'll let her stand on my car.
Okay. Yeah, just, you know, I'm being flippant, but that
You shouldn't have a party
is,
if you go to that much trouble.
Do the Google
Yeah.
Maps tell you to go King Street, or do the Google Maps tell you to go through downtown?
I myself am not a fan of apps, so I couldn't speak.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that one of the selling points too for this area in Smith College is the downtown. I mean, it's gorgeous, and so if somebody takes King Street, they might be like, ugh. Whereas if they take Main Street, they say
Oh,
how
I love
idyllic it is. So
I drive down Main Street sometimes, even though it's longer, because I like the experience.
All right, so we'll work on this. I know you're looking for a little bit of direction. Can you think of anything you could do that would help?
Well, I was just going to ask, for some direction. Like, we'll be glad to, we will do a mock-up if that's what the board would like to see, but I want it to make sense. I want to do it so that the board will come and see it. And it's the effort
Right.
that we put into it would be a one-time thing. And getting the check off from DPW that we're out there with a ladder and all of that.
So of the signs, there's the one in front of Green Bee and one in front of the church. The one in front of the
Front of
church
the-
might be too big for your
Edwards.
taste.
That's the one that's 4 feet, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's too big for my taste too.
Okay. And it sounds like library, we might just like to see them come up with a location that doesn't compromise the crosswalk.
On the other side.
So those are the three, right?
I have one more comment. I agree with Mike. I think he said about, or maybe it was Chris, so I can't tell you Mark. Yeah. I would not like to see any more investment in DPW time or money for this. I do think it should be underwritten by Smith.
I just asked. Yeah,
Yes, the bank roll.
I was ready to vote for this thing.
I probably should be too. I don't know. But
I think that's a legitimate question.
Ned, who's been dealing with this on your
Laura Hanson.
okay. Because somewhere the statement was made with the DPW is under the impression that there's a better place for that crosswalk sign up by College Hall, and if that's in fact true, I'm fine with that. But I'd like to hear that said.
Okay, so I guess we have a couple of issues, or someone has an issue with almost all three places.
I like the concept.
Trying to think what to ask of you.
Patience.
Patience. There you go. Patience.
Not a problem.
And perhaps a mock-up that you could leave here at the DPW that we could come and take a look at. It just seems like too much at this very moment to try to organize everybody to.
My concern about having Smith prepare a sign 2.5 by 4 is in this room it's going to look huge. But in its proposed location, it may look just right. And so we've got to, I think it requires more of a field trip for those that are uncomfortable with this rather than.
Right. But I can't think where to ask them to leave the sign, or, just inside the doorway at the church, or.
Well, we'll provide, we'll have something that size, do a mock-up. We'll even, can print that sign on paper similar to this and put it in position for you. But I think you're putting the college in a hard spot because you're uncertain of the size. You'd like to see it, but yet I don't really hear a commitment of coming out to see it. So I guess that's what I would need from you.
How about if it were set up some morning?
I'll set a time and date now if people want to organize it.
Okay, so can we do that by email instead of right this second?
Absolutely.
That'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think if you talk to Ned or Jim or BJ, you can get all of our emails,
Okay.
and we can. Jim?
Quorum issues.
Well, it might be up there for a couple of hours in the morning. We could
As long as
just.
there aren't 40 out there at the same
Yeah.
time, that's all I'm saying.
And look ahead.
Okay.
You can walk
I
at
think
it.
yeah, right.
A time's pretend you're getting a coffee somewhere.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, Terry.
What are you doing here? Man! What are the chances? All right, does that
That
sound right?
sounds fine.
Okay.
Okay, so as of now, that would be the next step. We won't be on the agenda in 2 weeks. You won't be expecting more of a presentation from us at the next meeting.
Correct.
Simply to arrange a site visit. Sounds good.
And we'll figure it out via email.
That sounds good.
Super. Thanks for coming
Okay.
in.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Carla.
Is there a chance for us to get this type of the material in advance, just to?
Well, we knew they were coming. I don't know about getting the board, the boards.
Like a one sentence.
Yeah, just like the agenda came out and said, that had sign locations that they were looking for signs, some.
We did get it. BJ sent it. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just really
Of
dark.
course you couldn't see it, but
The sign,
the
well, you
concept
couldn't
was there.
see the pictures, but all the descriptions
Yeah,
and stuff.
this,
Yeah.
most of the thing has an attachment.
It was nighttime when the pictures were taken in the black and white. Yeah.
Then I withdraw my.
Okay, next is setting a date for a claims committee meeting. I'll just do it before the next meeting.
2 claims committee meetings. 2 instances, both sewer.
Oh,
and
I see.
house.
Oh, those are private.
No, I have to admit, I'm going to miss the next 2 meetings.
An easement.
So, and since Gary isn't here, I don't know if that's gonna be a problem. Next to, BPW.
So you won't be back until the 25th of July?
I'll be back before then, but we're not having a meeting. When I'll be back.
BJ, do you have the impression these are pressing meetings? Can they wait a few weeks?
I don't think that they're
No, they can wait.
pressing,
Okay.
but
Because we don't have Gary,
Right.
and it's one of these moments we'll probably talk about a summer schedule.
Right. That's what we need to think about too.
Well, every place is a private way.
it is.
Well, the sewer easement apparently I just heard.
Yes.
Which one's a private way?
Wilder Place is next to Cooper's Corner.
Well, the sewer.
Oh, okay. Okay,
So do you wanna do this again next time?
yes, please.
Okay, but Ro, you're not gonna be here,
I won't,
What is the next time?
the 25th of June,
Wait, that-
27th.
no, there's a good chance I won't be here then.
There's
I
a
will
chance
not be
I won't,
here.
I won't be here either.
Well, then I'm not coming.
It won't matter, there's not any quorum.
Oh, so there's not a forum next time.
Well, 1, 2, 3, we don't know
4,
about
Mike's
Gary.
not gonna be here.
Oh, I didn't hear you, Mike.
So there won't be a
Wow.
meeting.
Alright, so we'll be attentive to that.
I may be, but at this point, I'm trying to be in DC that day, so.
Okay.
Okay, well, so we'll,
Pick July 4th.
We'll talk about that
Yes.
after. Okay.
okay, next, we're gonna discuss a contract for gaseous chlorine.
Can I make a motion that we take something out of, staff out of order so that we can
Sorry, you're right.
keep them
Excellent point.
behind on?
Could I have a I'm sorry, I totally spaced.
I make a motion to take the means-based discount for transfer station permits out of order.
Second.
Want me to give you an overview?
There's this,
This is actually old business by now. If you're not gonna have a quorum at the next meeting, I hope maybe you can act on this, because normally we're selling our vehicle permits in the office all through June, so that we don't have to charge somebody $25 and then say it's only good for 2 more weeks. But also July 1 is when the permits expire and we start selling them. So, just as an overview, this means-based discount was recommended unanimously by the Solid Waste Reduction and Management Task Force a year ago. And it's been brought to, we were talking first about the easiest way was just to automatically qualify anyone who qualifies for the local property and CPA tax exemption through the assessor's office. But that was about a year ago we were talking about this, and then this is kind of the next generation. So this, as an overview, this would replace the current permit structure, which is $25 for residents, $5 for seniors. There's also another program that the Council on Aging runs, which gives a discount to people who are taking care of elderly or handicapped people, but are not necessarily residents of Northampton. So this would replace all of that. And instead, people would qualify for this discount if they are pre-qualified for governmental and non-governmental assistance programs. And basically, they're pre-qualified because they're income eligible. So we did some research about existing public assistance programs. I've been in talking to a lot of people. It's very easy for them to present proof that they are on these programs. They have cards, they have letters of acceptance, and they actually keep them pretty handy because it qualifies them for many different kinds of benefits. So it's not a hardship to ask for proof of these. So it would be a really simple application, and on the back of this page is just the information that we would ask for. It's not really formatted, but it's kind of the framework of what we would be putting on an application. So this would qualify them for a free permit, a free membership to the composting program, half-price bags, which they would be able to get one package of any of the sizes on a quarterly basis. And again, they wouldn't have to keep proving that they're part of the program, they'd just be on the list. And they would have to reapply every fiscal year, so July 1, they'd be on the same schedule as everyone else. This would be fairly widely publicized because we want the people who qualify to take advantage of it. But I do want to say that the vast majority of income-eligible residents are living in housing authority properties or other subsidized housing where they are receiving trash and recycling services on site. So we're not serving that the bulk of that population in Northampton. So we're really not expecting like 1,000 people to apply. It's more like hundreds, maybe 200, 300 at the most. That's kind of the overview of it.
I make a motion, we,
Just,
can I ask?
just to say, and the $5 sticker fee would go to 25.
Yes.
Period.
Yes. It would be $25 across the board unless you qualified for one of these, as income eligible under one of these programs.
So we're replacing discounts
Well, we're creating a discount.
in lieu of the other discount.
I don't think we have the other one right now, do we?
We have the 62 plus.
Yes.
Oh, we do, okay.
Yeah, seniors are $5, residents are $25.
And are you also proposing doing away with the senior?
The senior discount, yes, it would replace the current.
So is that part of, but that'll be a separate vote?
No, actually, this is all one package.
I see it, okay.
It's not stated, but it's.
Yes, second
on
paragraph.
Yeah.
Second
Oh,
paragraph.
it is.
Yes, it is. And I know we've heard from the Council on Aging on this. Have we heard from anybody else?
Yeah, there was a public comment 4 weeks ago about in support for this.
In support?
Yeah.
Do we remember who it was?
I do, actually. It was another member of the Solid Waste Reduction Management, Mark Kermit.
BJ?
How are we going to track the people that come in for bags so that they're really only getting one free package, half price package quarterly?
So there'll be a list of people who have applied, who have given evidence that they are qualified under one of those programs. So we'll have their name on the list. And if they qualify for the 41C through the assessor's office, that's a list that's kept updated all the time, so we can just call them.
It's a great program, and you've all worked on this, right?
Mm-hmm.
I like it.
And MJ and David attended the meeting, that was probably maybe a month ago, or maybe more. And I've attended a couple of meetings of the Committee on Disabilities, and they do have they would like to see the discount for the seniors stay as it is, and they would like the discount to apply to anyone who has a handicap placard or plate. So basically, status quo, but add the handicap residents. So that is their position.
Well, a couple of years ago, the Mayor's Task Force on Solid Waste asked us to consider some kind of a means-based discount, so this fulfills.
Yeah, specifically
request.
their recommendation, which was unanimous, was to go to a means-based discount as opposed to senior.
Yeah.
discount.
And as I understand it, Ned was saying this morning that this was approved by the joint committee last.
There was discussion and they didn't vote on it, but they were all in.
Well, consensus.
Consensus was to make it move forward. That's correct.
So it's the same thing.
I an additional support.
Yeah.
Well, I think that they were made aware of it, they knew we were voting on it this evening, it was on our agenda. So I don't think it preempted our decision.
Exactly.
They were made aware of it.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
I just,
Again?
Can I put a motion on the table first before we start discussion?
Yeah, we need
Can I make a motion that we adopt the means-based discount for the Northampton transfer station?
I'll second that.
Is there any further discussion around the table at the moment?
Well,
Well, I just think this is a very, very appropriate action to take, that there's been a section of the city population that has not had an advantage of an opportunity to get a discounted permit system, and further, they're now being offered this opportunity to purchase bags at half price on a quarterly basis. And it to me, it makes perfect sense to proceed with this program and help those that truly need it, as opposed to the other guidelines that were proposed that were really sort of artificial. And I just fully support going ahead with this program.
I don't have anything to add, I agree with you.
Mimi?
I completely agree with this. I was on the task force, and I definitely think need space is good. I'm just a little concerned about how it's going to be accepted by the public, because I think senior citizens that maybe don't qualify for certain programs but are also still on fixed incomes might feel the pinch, and people were already upset about the water and sewer. So I'm just putting it out there that, you know, if it's as a headline tomorrow in the Gazette that it's going to affect seniors that way, I'm just wondering about how you might want to think about how it gets presented to the public that this decision was made. Again, unfortunately, people only pay attention once it's in the newspaper and they're not coming to the meetings. But I'm just putting that out there because.
Yeah, thank you.
I will add one more thing to what Michael said, which is I think that this means-based discount is the most fair and equitable way to distribute the costs of waste disposal, which we all have to pay attention to, rather than just simply age or handicap status, for which they're not clearly income-based issues, but that waste disposal costs have increased hugely, and we need to reflect that and support that.
Let's call the question. So we are voting to discontinue the age-based discount and replace it with a means-based discount as outlined in this proposal.
Yes.
All in favor of moving forward?
Aye.
Any objections?
Thank you, Karen.
Are you here to make any comments, or?
No, I'm here to,
Stormwater.
do you want any of the solid waste things before Karen goes away?
Yeah, I wasn't gonna go away yet.
Well, I mean, you've got the floor.
All right.
Right, yeah. Solid waste planning update, is that what you're trying to do?
I make a motion that we take the next two items, solid waste planning update and Northampton Reuse Center Vision, out of order.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so solid waste planning update, would that be first, or the vision?
The solid waste update, planning update. I don't think there's much to say except.
I guess this is on the agenda because we wanna not lose track of it, but
Don't think we.
nothing's changed since we last talked. And that was to maintain status quo,
Right.
except for the means-based discount, and reconvene in the fall to further develop some of the ideas that we discussed over the last couple of months.
Okay.
And just, I think we're looking at a spring closing of the landfill, and that should be out there, but
Right.
we believe that it'll continue to remain open, and then the idea would be to close it down early in the spring, so that we could take advantage of the construction season to do what we needed to do.
And I think tonnage is up slightly. Things are slightly up, down, over there. Great. And then the dream proposal, dream team.
Yeah, over the reuse committee has been working over the course of time to do the special events that are looking to reuse and to divert things out of the landfill and the trash bin. And we decided that we would brainstorm what our dream reuse center would look like, and we worked through that in a couple iterations and then trimmed it back, and it has now been word crafted such that it's a vision statement for the little working group that's working on those things. And I think that the idea was just to help the board be aware of it, that there is this small group that's working. They did the June 2nd event. We're looking to try to see what's going on with the reuse center. We're sort of bird dogging the department in terms of the status of the Mass DOT site next door, in terms of whether or not the city's gonna acquire that and at what time, and just trying to move those ideas forward.
And we wanted to share it with the board and get any comments that you might have to add to it.
Was the June 2nd event the plastic event at Smith Oak?
Yes.
Yes.
It was
The
beyond
ring
that
and
though.
plastic.
It was like a 20-ring circus though.
Awesome. It was absolutely awesome. But I want to say, because that was on my list of when we get around to things we wanted to talk about at the end. I didn't know it was going to happen. So that's number one. I think that is the truest form of recycling, where because I was just a taker. I was not a bringer, and I think that's. I think I actually ran into Paul Spector like the next day walking our dogs, and he didn't know about it either, which I think is problem number two.
Although all the counselors were emailed with information about it.
I understand that. I think it's but I think it has to do with information overload. So what I would recommend, and I'm sure now knowing that it came out of this group, it's probably on your list of things to do, is to institutionalize it. And if it was going to be something that was ongoing with a designated location, that eliminates that problem. But I think that's just the best way to do things. I think that I've got 5-gallon buckets now. I'm psyched.
Your institutionalization is a really good point. That was one of the most common comments I heard for people leaving it, and I was there for all the people exiting. And I think that we would do that, and it's certainly on Karen's agenda and the committee's agenda, and the only thing that's holding us back is staff time, volunteer time, and money.
Yeah.
So.
So we're working on 4 events for the fall.
Great.
So
Great. Okay.
But I think Chris's point, if I could be so bold, is to say, to have it be on a regular basis, every September and every June, this is what's gonna happen.
Right.
And we would head toward that, because we'd like to do that.
I mean, I know I stockpile electronics for that moment in time, and I look for it because I want to do it that way. So I think it would really improve participation at both ends, give and take.
Yeah. The committees worked really hard to have a calendar online, and I think that that's up. And we've also linked it to the City of Northampton site. So there's an attempt to get people to look and see what the calendar says, because we can't always have things in the same time period.
So electronics October 13th at JFK.
Great. Well, I
With
applauded.
with another rally.
I was very pleased. I added 2 milk crates and 4 5-gallon jugs. I'm happy.
So MJ, do you have more that you'd like to say?
No, I just wanted to make sure that you knew that's why it was in your hands, is
Okay.
the committee's been working, we wanted to make sure that we were communicating with the full board, not
Gotcha.
just working off in our own little corner, and then, ta-da!
Okay. Well, you sure got great press. I think both before and after, is that right? There was something afterwards too?
Yeah, there was an editorial
Yeah,
afterwards.
yeah. I thought that was great.
When we did it last fall, we had a great turnout. It's really been a home run event both times.
Yeah, the weather really dampened the participation, but the
So
spirit of the participants and the volunteers was great.
There were a lot of people that were just takers. I was surprised.
Yeah, and they came at the end too, which was nice.
Even better, yeah. Mike and David, do you have anything from when you read through the proposal that you can think of that you might wanna, that you wish that you had seen in
I
there?
haven't seen the proposal.
Well, I know you got it.
I did?
Uh-huh,
Email?
uh-huh,
I did.
with your packet.
I did.
I think maybe 2 meetings ago,
Yeah.
it ended up with the packet, but we.
To answer your question, no.
Okay.
Mm.
But if you guys, do you remember getting it and have you
No, I
read it?
don't.
Okay.
No.
If you could be thoughtful in reading it and give us any comments, it'd be
I'll send it out again in the next day.
After you're done with these.
You're not done?
All right,
That's the face.
thank you. Thanks, Karen.
Thanks, Karen.
Thanks, Karen.
See you.
Can I have a motion now to take stormwater and flood control assessment out of order?
So moved.
We have, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
I had talked to Ned and Jim, and I had asked if Jim could put together a little presentation, just walking us through this report, focusing on the parts that are critical for us moving forward. In this report, there's quite a bit of discussion of some problem areas in the city, areas where we know we have drainage issues, and I think I'm expressing this the right way to say that the idea of exploring those 4 areas was to just get some sense of what we're looking at ballpark-wise if we were to tackle one of these. What kind of money would it take to try to solve one of these problem areas, solve the problems inherent in these problem areas? And then the rest of it is an assessment of our stormwater system and some thoughts about how we might move forward. And that's the part I asked Jim to specifically focus on.
Part 2.
Well, it's a little bit of an
Yeah.
untangling, very intertwined.
Yep.
So I put together a few thoughts. I went through the document and tried to pull out some of the highlights that are relevant to the board discussion and understanding what the issue is. As a fact checker, Ned and I had asked Doug McDonald, our stormwater engineer, to be here tonight. So if I go too far off the rails, Doug's there to grasp me and get me back in line. There's been a need, I think, to take a close look at the city's stormwater infrastructure and control infrastructure that Ned and I have recognized over the last 2 or 3 years. We've seen regulatory changes that are coming down the road. We've seen new mandates on flood control that are coming down the road, and a lot of other basic needs of our antique infrastructure. I like that, antique infrastructure. I think that's a good one. But we've seen a lot of needs that are coming at the city that need to be addressed, and we've also seen that the funding and the available funds within the general fund allocation to drainage and flood control has diminished down to pretty much nothing as time has gone on here in recent times because of the lack of funding in general that the city's been grappling with. So the board signed a contract with CDM to look at the study, and the goal of it was to get a look at what are the financial obligations of the city moving forward, both in terms of regulatory compliance, Army Corps of Engineers mandates on flood control, our general needs to deal with our old infrastructure in terms of upgrades and replacement and maintenance, and changes that may be needed with additional operation and maintenance staff as regulatory requirements come into play. So we've had the foresight to see these things coming. CDM has been working on this report to look at what are these funding needs moving forward. And then they developed a plan. They painted a picture, if you will, of what the funding needs are going to be over time for flood control and stormwater and river erosion projects to get a sense of what are the revenue needs in these areas for the city. And then based on those revenue needs, we can look at the general fund and realize that there's very little or no general fund money that would be available to meet these needs, or to look at developing a new utility which would generate the revenues necessary to take care of the revenue needs that they've identified in the study. So that was sort of the overall goal of what we went into with CDM to have them take a look at. I guess secondarily, or maybe more importantly, these things that we're talking about, upgrading the city's aging stormwater management system and developing strategies to protect the city from natural hazards, are actually 2 components in the city's Sustainable Northampton comprehensive plan that was approved by the city in 2007. So we're aligned with the overall goals of the city. We're focusing in on the details of how to implement what needs to be done to meet these obligations. The report goes into a little bit of the infrastructure overview, and I think it's always instructive. I don't have these numbers memorized, but it's always instructive. I jotted them down out of the report to get a sense of scale of the system. And actually, Doug had worked with Andy Reether in the engineering division to print out this plan which shows the city's drainage system. So just visually, you can get a sense, the purple lines here are the different drainage systems within the city limits. So you can see it's aging infrastructure and stormwater related things are, these are systems that we have citywide that require attention. Some other key figures that are instructive to give you a sense of scale. Within the system, there's about 3,750 catch basins. There's about 108 miles of storm drain. We've got 280 outfalls to the Mill River and other streams within the city. A lot of the system that was installed is old. Much of it was found to be under capacity based on work that CDM did. They looked at certain study areas, as Terry had alluded to, and one of the things that conclusions that they drew when they looked at some of the study areas was that if you look at the types of pipe that are installed in these study areas, about 30 to 40% of the pipe is clay pipe. So that, to me, is, I see that in the table, it just jumps out as a real indicator of the age of the system. Not too many people use clay pipe for this type of infrastructure anymore, so it gives you a sense of, a lot of the pipe systems that we have, 100 years old or more, so a very old system. The flood control system, which we've talked about with the board in recent meetings, we've had the Army Corps of Engineers coming in annually. We recently got two thick, very detailed inspection reports that the Corps did and provided to us with a list of deadlines for action. I know the board members have taken those individually and have enjoyed the contents of the documents. But the flood control system, also very old, dates back to around 1940. We've got two systems, one along the Connecticut River. We've got a levee system that's about a mile long along the Connecticut. There's 3 concrete flood walls. We've got 3 48-inch diameter pumps that are capable of pumping up to about 150,000 gallons per minute under flood conditions. We've got 2 old gas engines and 1 diesel engine that run the pumps, and an emergency generator that's also very old out there. And those systems were discussed in some detail in the CDM report in terms of the condition. I'll talk about that in a little bit. The Mill River system is a 2,300 foot levee system. It's a concrete flood wall. There's a South Street control structure. It's actually, it's called the drop structure, but it's also regulated as a dam. It was constructed as an engineering feature to control the grade line on the Mill River to prevent erosion within the Mill River diversion. Because the Mill River, as the board members know, used to go through the downtown area, and it was diverted to prevent flooding of downtown. The diversion channel itself is about 2 miles long. So these are the things that need to be maintained and operated for flood protection for the city. The report also documents other areas where we have infrastructure that runs along the Mill River in certain circumstances where areas that are subject to erosion because of the action of the Mill River. So we've got a river road retaining wall, there's a sewer interceptor main that runs along the retaining wall. We've talked about that in the past. We've applied for a FEMA grant to help repair the retaining wall. It's an expensive project, over $1 million. There's just downstream of Musant Beach, along Roberts Middle Brook Channel, there's also a large erosion area in the channel that's headed in the direction of some private property there. That's another project that we're looking at, and also Federal Street retaining walls. So there's other sort of stormwater type of infrastructure that we have that are expensive projects, and no way to really fund them other than through trying to apply for very competitive grants and limited federal funding for those. The report gets into the current funding, our system. At the moment, we do have MPDES permit requirements for educational outreach, annual cleaning of catch basins, implementing a stormwater permit program, which is a lot of what Doug does day to day for the city. I think generally the budget for that is around $100,000 a year for these types of activities that we do. The drainage operations staff, we have a sewer drain division. I think as most of the board members know, 2/3 of the sewer drain division comes out of the sewer enterprise fund, third comes from the general fund, so there's sort of a split amongst the people that we have. Flood control staff activities are compensated through the general fund for activities in that regard. So the report goes on to describe, what are the changes, what are the obligations coming up in the future, and looks at a general schedule over a 20-year period. What are the things that are immediate, intermediate, and long-term? Certainly in the immediate priority category, there are things that we've been talking about almost at every board meeting as of late, and they're related to flood control demands by the Army Corps of Engineers. They have instructed the city and given us 2 deadlines related to doing engineering assessments and some construction maintenance work related to the Mill River and the Connecticut River flood control systems, and those are associated with deadlines. FY13 Mill River flood control system improvements was estimated to be a little over $600,000. In FY14, the Connecticut on the Connecticut River side, it's estimated that the work is about $550,000. So those projects are alone, significant amount of money. The city is under obligations to accomplish these directives at the risk of losing the ability to get mitigation fund money from FEMA if flooding were to occur and these flood control systems were to fail. So it's those are obligations that are hitting us today. We don't have the capital money to do these projects. We have had discussions with the mayor about the obligations. We're doing what we can with city staff. We've got Doug and Nicole, our senior scientists, and other engineers in the engineering division working on plans and permitting applications to try to advance what we can do with these flood control mandates to the best that we can with the limited funding that we have to try to show that we're advancing the cause on those items. The report also goes into pending stormwater permit requirements. The EPA is anticipated to issue later in the year. That's going to have a lot of obligations for the city, both in terms of operations requirements, which would include doubling the frequency of catch basin cleaning, for example, from annually to twice a year. There's a lot of other managerial work for Doug and technical staff in terms of outfall sampling, GIS development, education and outreach. There are other capital needs in terms of what they're calling green retrofit, stormwater retrofit projects on city infrastructure, roads projects, city properties, trying to make improvements in the way that the city manages stormwater on property that the city owns. So there's a lot of obligations that are described in there. The report also touches on immediate projects, these other stream projects I mentioned, the Federal Street retaining wall, River Road retaining wall, these sorts of projects are described in there. I guess in sum, you can look at the table that sort of itemizes these things, but the first couple of years, the funding demand is somewhere around $1.7 million or so, depending on how things land exactly. So it gives you a sense of the scale. It's bigger than we have money to do, and there are a lot of these obligations that are really, they're things that the city needs to take care of to comply with federal mandates for the things that we're discussing. In the slightly longer term, CDM has identified larger projects like replacement of the flood control pump station, other levee improvements which may result from a detailed engineering analysis that the Corps of Engineers is telling us that we need to do on the flood control levee system. So there are some unknowns. There are other general immediate and long-term priorities, which basically is upgrading our drainage improvements for existing infrastructure. I think the North Street project, which we've talked about, is one of the projects that we did have funding this year to undertake full street reconstruction on North Street. That's about a $1.8 million project. About $220,000 of that project is dedicated to replacing about 2,000 feet of storm drain pipe. So you can get a sense of the scale of the cost. One street, one project, it's a couple $100,000 to do that. We have a long list of streets that have drainage improvements that are necessary and no means to fund them. We've talked about Milton Street in the past, and I look at Milton Street as sort of a poster child of the type of project that is just a total disaster in terms of pavement, residents complain and inquire about when is this going to be paved, and engineering has worked on a design for reconstruction of that street, but there's no funding mechanism to replace the drainage, so we don't want to pave a street when there are utilities underneath that need to be improved or replaced. So CDM has worked into the funding schedule an amount of sort of annual drain replacement funding, very similar to what we do on the sewer side or the water side. We have a sewer replacement amount that we put in the budget every year, and water line replacement account. So it'll be something that would fall along those same lines to replace aging infrastructure that will allow these other projects to move ahead. So looking at the obligations, the next step that CDM did is they looked at what are the ways to fund it. If the city is going to have difficulties funding these obligations to general fund, what are the other mechanisms to do it? And the report is called a Flood Control Stormwater System Assessment Utility Plan. The report does get into an evaluation of how a flood control and stormwater utility could be designed and implemented if the city should decide to go that way to take care of these obligations. It's doing a stormwater utility is something that's allowed by Massachusetts general laws. There were laws and a law put in place that allows the development of this type of utility. A number of communities have used them to meet these obligations in the past. I think in the future there'll be more and more communities looking at developing these utilities. Just last month, the Water Infrastructure Finance Committee, which was a committee that was appointed by the governor and established under legislative act, came out with a report recommending that communities look seriously at developing stormwater utilities to meet these aging infrastructure needs on the stormwater and flood control side. So I see a lot of things that we're doing are consistent with what other communities are doing in the leadership that we're seeing from the state in terms of how best to deal with with this sort of thing. So in the latter part of the report that CDM put together, they identified ways to put together a utility. And basically what they're saying is the utility is a great way to set up a system to equitably pay for infrastructure that's needed. And they're recommending that one of the best ways to put together this type of system that a lot of other communities have used is based on the amount of impervious area on a piece of property. So the more impervious area you have on a property, the more runoff that property generates, the more impacts on city stormwater drainage systems, the more impacts on river systems. So they developed a strategy to look at impervious area as a means to generate a bill for the types of infrastructure that the demands are being placed on. The utility would be a little bit different in terms of the general fund and paying the share of paying for the infrastructure for obvious reasons. It's based on impervious area. It's not based on taxation. Right, so it's a fee. It's basically a fee for service. And like other utilities that the board manages, water utility, sewer utility, there aren't exemptions for institutions and nonprofits, that sort of thing. So people that are exempt from paying general fund would not be exempt from paying this fee that would go into the system. So
they actually go out of their way to point that out.
Yeah.
Right, and it's, again, it gets to an issue of equity and spreading the cost among the users of these systems. So it makes a lot of sense, and I think communities that have used it have used this impervious area type of calculation to look at it, and they had some numbers in there. I think Terry was hoping I'd point to some tables tonight, but I'm not going to do that. I made a few bullets, keep the flipping to a minimum. But of the CDM, there's a lot of great information on the GIS system. These are really, really powerful tools that we can use to set up a utility. There's a lot of great numbers in here, a lot of great technical information that can be used. But what I wanted to say was that they came up with a calculation that showed that the impervious area within the city, 32% is commercial or industrial, 24% at the moment is tax exempt property, 42% is residential. So it gives you a sense of how that would come out. They go on to look at the steps of how what they call an equivalent residential unit is sort of the technical term of what would be used as the basis for billing. They describe the steps in a lot of detail there, and in the back you can go crazy with the detail if you'd like to figure out exactly how it works. But using a lot of the information in GIS, they came up with what the estimated fee might be for the first year based on the projects that we talked about briefly a few minutes ago. And what they came up with was a fee for a single-family home, which would be $66. So I think the intent is to say these are, some of them are big picture numbers, particularly as you extend projects out. The priorities may change over time and that sort of thing. But you get a sense of the order of magnitude. Less than $100, somewhere in the $60 to $70 range would be necessary to meet the city's obligations for the first year. They have other information and tables in the document that indicates that for 10,000 square foot of impervious area, the bill would be $250 per year. 100,000 square foot of impervious area would be $2,500 per year. They talk about stormwater credits a little bit in there. If someone does extraordinary actions to build some type of stormwater infrastructure on their property that limits their impact to the city system, some communities have set up credit systems to allow that to be accounted for. So a reasonable way of encouraging people to do things with green infrastructure, water reuse, and that sort of thing. When Doug worked with Andy to have this this plot made, there's a lot of gray shading in here, and what he did is he plotted out areas of impervious. The impervious areas are shown in gray, basically, on this plan. So it's kind of fun to look at because you can see, and you know this anyway, I mean, everyone obviously knows this, but this is King Street area down here, downtown, sort of Florence Center, the hospital, Leeds. So the highly developed areas where there's a lot of impervious area, you can just get a quick look at it and see, well, these are the areas that are having a lot of runoff and impact into certain parts of the system. But the other thing it shows, obviously, is that there, residential areas as well have an impact, and we've got municipal infrastructure in areas throughout the community, and it really is a situation where we've got infrastructure and their impacts and projects and things that need to be maintained over time. So I think that was really the focus of the study and how it concluded. There are things that they describe in there about where we need to go from here in terms of the report. If you want to develop a utility, what are the nuts and bolts in terms of billing and invoicing, and we have systems in place now for water and sewer that would be built onto that. I mentioned the general laws allow cities to prepare ordinances for utilities like this, be very similar to the sewer utility ordinance that we have. So there'd be a new ordinance requirement to implement this type of utility option. Those things would need to be worked on to work out all the details. But that was really the kind of an overview of the study. I know the board hasn't had it a long time. We'd be happy to answer any questions tonight, or meet with folks individually, or feel free to call me at any time if there's questions about information. Obviously, Ned, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have about it.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks.
Nice presentation.
Any immediate questions?
Yeah, the stormwater utility, fees that we set up, or might set up. It sounded like this report and this cost included some flood control, some flood protection issues also. Would you combine all of that and fund it under the stormwater utility fee?
It would be, it's where it's described in the report as a stormwater and flood control utility assessment, so that would be the idea, to take all those runoff and storm-related items into one utility and take care of the obligations that way.
Okay, and the statutory authorization at the state level that allows you to do the stormwater utility would allow you to extend that to the flood control fees?
It would, okay.
The other question I had is that, I think I had heard somewhere that if we don't do the work on the levees, that it might also put us at risk, or our downtown property owners, of not being able to get flood insurance.
Yes, they mentioned that. Yeah.
So it's not just
Could
being,
we expand on that a little bit? Because I heard that early on, but then I haven't heard it as clearly lately. So I wasn't quite sure what the consequence of, I think it was linked to if our flood control system's decertified, then there's a consequence to that, and I'm not I'm not quite sure what the consequence is.
The way I've read the consequences, if we are decertified, right now we are considered minimally acceptable by the Army Corps. If we lose that designation, we will not be eligible for post-flood disaster funding to repair the system if it fails. The concern, I believe, it has to do with the flooding insurance or flood insurance for downtown businesses is that FEMA is in the process of remapping their 100-year flood zones. My understanding, if the system is not certified at some point in the future, that they will consider that there is no flood control for the city. And therefore, the floodplain will not be at the Dyke Wall, but will be throughout the entire downtown area. And that will drive those insurance costs.
And based on the flood in 38, that would include all of Pleasant Street, Conn Street, maybe not up on the highest parts of Main Street, but perhaps at the intersection of Route 5 and Main Street. Flooding could get up that high, I think.
The flood of 36, we have photos that show it reached all the way to Strong Avenue on that, down Pleasant Street. And obviously down below on Main Street at Fitzroy's, that was quite a bit underwater. I think there's a picture of that here also, at the bridge, the railroad trestle.
The way I interpreted it when I read it, the analogy I developed was it's sort of like in health insurance, it's like a pre-existing condition. If your system isn't certified, you're assumed to have the disease, and therefore no insurers are going to want to take you on.
Or they'll take you on at a very
An
high price.
astronomical price.
And it's not gonna be 10 or 20% higher.
Yeah.
And I don't have a figure, but it could be easily quadruple.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's catastrophic to the businesses.
And homeowners.
And if you don't have the insurance, you can't get a mortgage.
Right.
I mean,
Lots of consequences.
major.
I was sort of concerned in reading through this, how often they talked about by the end of FY12.
Yeah, me too.
And it was mentioned again and again. What?
Isn't it like in 3 weeks?
Well, I wanted to make sure that it was our FY12, and which I assumed that it was. So, or if it was just a calendar year FY12.
Yeah, I think the schedule, CDM has been working on this report for quite a while, and there's been creep on a couple of different things. One is that the Army Corps has given us a little bit of a reprieve on the dates. We had some dates that they issued before, and then recently, when they came out with inspection reports, they gave us a little more time to do things. So, for example, I mentioned the Mill River Flood Control, it's FY13, and then Connecticut River Flood Control. I'll actually give you the actual dates. The Mill River Flood Control
14.
was January 2013 when certain things needed to be done.
Right.
Connecticut River Flood Control was January 2014, they wanted things done. The other thing that has slipped is the EPA is working on issuing a new permit for communities under this multi-sector permit program. The draft came out, a lot of the and it was so the draft permit came out, which would stipulate the conditions under which we would need to manage our stormwater systems. And there were a lot of new requirements in that had a lot of cost implications. And Ed and I worked with the previous mayor Higgins, who submitted 2 pages of comments about fiscal concerns, and then we submitted 2 pages of comments about technical concerns. EPA got buried by communities with similar concerns that we had articulated. And the permit, which was expected to have been out several months ago, still has not been issued. And now it could be, I don't know what you've heard lately, Doug, they were saying the summer, maybe the fall.
They keep saying
So it keeps,
about 6 months from.
that was something that was on the fast track to be issued by EPA. And I think a little bit because of the concerns of communities, that's crept a little bit.
And just to continue my thought, so having read that, one of the first things that came to me is like, I don't have a feeling for how this is an ordinance-driven concept to do a stormwater flooding utility. So, what are we talking about in terms of getting an ordinance through the city, and has it been mentioned to the joint council?
If I could speak to that. The joint council is aware of it. We had a larger discussion of it last week, or last Monday. Basically, the thought seems to be coalescing around if our board thinks this is a good idea, and speaking purely personally, I just hardly see any alternative. Then the next step is to open the conversation with city councilors. We've talked about maybe asking for some kind of a joint meeting with the city councilors where we bring them along to the status quo as we see it. CDM has offered to come, well actually, we're paying them to come out and make as many as 3 presentations. We're imagining that would be a good time during some kind of a joint meeting to have them come and make part of the presentation. And then if this, so implicit in that meeting would be that we've already decided that we like this idea, we support this idea, we're asking them to consider the idea. City Council has to have pass a resolution allowing us to create this utility. The state statutes give us all of the framework we need, but we need the City Council's agreement to begin actually sending out bills. Assuming the City Council is receptive at this proposed or hypothetical joint meeting, the next step would be another meeting, probably at JFK, where we present everything to the public at large, get feedback, get comments. Timeline could be months. I don't see this as being something we can wait years to decide on. 4 months. 4 months might be ambitious. Something like that. So I imagine this moving forward reasonably quickly. The deadlines from the Army Corps of Engineers are coming up very quickly. And the regulatory burden for all of the reporting that the DOE is asking for is, you know, it's ongoing, it's constant. It's approaching 100,000 a year just to meet the reporting requirements that they're asking for.
And didn't you apply for funding for the river road flood wall improvements, but that was denied?
It's under review.
It's under review still. Okay.
So that's in my mind, and subject to discussion, I was thinking we could digest this until our next meeting, think about it, and then at our next meeting, I hope we could have a discussion about the pros and cons of considering a recommendation to create a stormwater utility. Or I guess I'd certainly be open to alternatives. But in any event, I'm imagining our next meeting we try to come together around some proposal.
And I just want to say, in terms of the conversation, the public conversation, I mean, I think the conversation we've been having with the joint committee goes beyond the stormwater piece, that it's the water and sewer and the whole infrastructure package. That there's the sense that there's a broader educational push that we need to make to help everyone understand the infrastructure needs. Yeah. Not just the stormwater and this new stuff coming up, but the pre-existing things that have triggered us to have these increases in the sewer and water increases. So this feels like there's attentiveness. Yeah. People are
the city councilors are asking for help in getting this information out to the public. The mayor is asking for help. You know, these are tough issues, big questions, and I think it's confusing is not the right word, but just seeing this stuff like increase without there's a in sales training, the value of a product is the price divided by the value. Or maybe it's the other way around, but anyway, it's an equation that involves both price, cost, and value. And if you can increase the perceived value, then the price looks like a bargain. If you're unaware of the value, then almost any price looks awfully high. And we're probably guilty of not helping people see the value of what this increase is being used for, or these increases.
Well, I just want to thank MJ for her comments, because I think it's important that I'm with you, Terry. I want to think about it a lot more, but given the size of the problem, I don't see really at this point an alternative. So I think that it's gonna serve us well if we can help put it in the context of this overall infrastructure development program. And I've already been approached by a couple of city councilors who talked about getting us on board to help tell that story.
You like some water, Jerry?
I have a couple of getting out ahead of this. I have a couple of practical questions I'd like to ask Jim if I could.
Defibrillator right around the corner.
The first one is, Jim, there are a series of inserts in here, and I've gone through all of them. I haven't found that one.
We developed that in-house.
Any way we can get access to that, either electronically or in hard copy? Because that's the one that's going to really sell a lot of people, I think. So I don't need it now, but I think that we're going to need to have that available. The other thing is, and I'm reassured, but Roy, you raised the question, is the immediacy of some of these deadlines, and I also acknowledge the fact that this is clearly work that's been done over time, so it's good to hear there's been some slippage, but I think that we're going to need to develop a really concise timeline for what the upcoming deadlines for some of these things are. The other thing that I think, and I wish Terry was here because he put this really well, is that a number of these things are case studies about things that we might want to do. They're not requirements. Obviously, they're urgent needs in a lot of ways, but they're not requirements. I think it would be useful for us to have a piece of paper or several pieces of paper that distill out of this the things that we must do, the things we ought to do, and the things we'd like to do.
Did you read my notes? That's exactly what I wrote down.
Great minds think alike,
Well, to have a sense of priority assigned to each of the different projects.
Right. And you know, when we combine the urgency component with the things that we have to do, I think that's going to get us over the hump on making the argument for why a lot of this is going to have to be done. So those are just my, and I apologize because we'll only have a chance to really go through it once. There's an awful lot of detail in there, and I appreciate you pulling the highlights for us.
Yes.
You know, one of the things that strikes me is that there are towns in Wyoming that don't have to worry about any of this. You know,
Let's move there.
It's you know, we live in a great spot, but we happen to also live next to one of the largest rivers in the country. We've got streams running through our town. It's just part of the bargain we've made to live in this great valley is that we're in a river valley, and so we're going to have to step up perhaps a little more than most. Gene.
Yeah, I have a 7 o'clock. I just have a quick question. Do we have a dollar amount that, you said $65 a household, do we have a dollar amount that we're looking at generating right now if this were implemented tomorrow?
Well, the $66 was based on, it was $1.7 million for the first year, for the revenue.
Yeah, but that ends in 3 weeks.
First year it was implementation.
Yeah.
I thought it was 3 quarters.
Okay.
Is that over the 2 years, or that's annual?
It was 1.7 in the first year.
Okay.
Like the costs are not 1.7. In the second year, they go quite significantly. But again, some of that stuff is optional. I mean, and by optional, I mean it doesn't have to happen in year 2.
The way CDM did the report and the way they scaled out what the expenses might look like, they took those areas that we asked them to examine for potential costs, and I think they worked them into the structure. And we might make entirely different choices.
Right.
So, Chris, your thought about must do, should do, could do, I think that's something I've been asking to have pulled apart, and we have the information to do it.
And I made that point while you
here.
were out, and I said I wish Terry was here because
So I've been asking that, and Jim has the information he needs to start. That's all part of the process.
All right.
Those revenue requirements are on table 5.6 for those who are looking for it.
In the sale,
It's actually 5.14 is the page.
so in the sale, if you have myself a job, I have to show them the value. They wanna see the value for the dollar amount. And so, it's, I mean, it's one-on-one. So, it's a good point. I never thought about it as trying to sell stormwater.
It doesn't get much better, I admit, but.
I'm just curious
Or
about.
sewage.
I'm just curious about the process, though. You say that the city council would make a resolution. Who would actually make the ordinance? Would it be a board of
It's
public
not
works
really an
ordinance,
ordinance, as I understand it. There's a statutory framework for creating an enterprise fund.
or okay?
We
And-
need authorization from the city council to implement it.
And then the city council, once you implement it, you will no longer have oversight. Every year, if they decide to go up by this percentage or that percentage, it'll be similar to the water and the sewer rates. The city council will just.
Yeah, and you can put an ordinance in place that, or try to pass an ordinance that would give you some type of oversight within that, in that fund, that enterprise.
The
Which I
check,
think-
the check and the balance is that we don't have the authority within an enterprise fund to borrow money. So,
As do the city.
so that power to borrow goes back to the city council. So, in a sense, no enterprise fund can get too far ahead of itself without circling back to the city council for permission to borrow money to take on the project.
So, I'm agreeing, I think, with many of us that I think that the threshold decision of whether or not we need a utility, I think, is easy enough to make, because I don't see an option, and no one sees an option. But I do think that then the key question is how much?
Yeah.
How much? And if we're gonna propose a utility, I think we need to be very comfortable with the amount of money that we're asking for. Because that's gonna get perhaps more scrutiny than the concept of the utility. You know, already we're saying that if we start at $66 a day, the example in this report, and it's just an example, shows it going up 2.5 times in 5 years.
It's an unfortunate example, and they made some assumptions that I don't think we would make.
Well, but this document's out, so as we figure out where we stand with this document and the whole concept, I think we need to be very comfortable with the cost so that we can all nod and say, yes, that's the right thing to do.
I think well before our next meeting, we can come up with bar graphs.
Well, I'd like to take the advantage to meet with Jim and Ned in the small group concept, if I could, because I have a number of questions on costs that I don't want to delve into tonight, but I want to get through before our next meeting, so that I'm either comfortable with them or I'm not comfortable. So I would like to see if we can set up some group meetings to go through this. We can do that.
Like a budget review
Yes,
meeting.
yes.
I think that,
Less than a quorum.
That's my cue to go.
See you.
Thank you, see ya.
Just a button?
Who knew?
I think Terry has described it well, that the report paints this picture and gives you an order of magnitude, we're talking about 60 or 600 or 6,000, but clearly the implementation and the decisions not only on year one about what the obligations are, but every subsequent year would be determined and scrutinized by the board in terms of every project that's necessary. So this report sort of gets you on the ball game, gives you the idea of how can this problem be solved, and then the actual implementation of it, the details of it, would be up to the board to determine specifically what's necessary, and it sounds like that's, we want to take it to the next step.
I mean, I heard, oh, sorry.
Well, I was just gonna say, but I don't know what will happen, what we could do, what could we do now that we don't have to wait a month for, continue the talks with the Joint Commission, get the graphs, have the small meetings. I think we wanna move it along, even though we have some other commitments like private ways, et cetera, that we wanna look at. But I do think that we need to move along on this and figure out what we want, so that if it takes time to get it to the city council, but we're sure of our commitments and where we're gonna go on this specific information, that we need to do it sooner rather than later.
Chris?
I'm gonna pass because it went away.
The other challenge we have is it sounds like many of us can't be at the next regularly scheduled meeting, so we need to work on, I think this is important enough where most of us ought to be here.
So we could, this would be happening right after July 4th, that meeting there.
Well, are the conflicts with people just the 27th, or are they that whole week? I wonder if there's another way to deal with this. Or if we can have just a stormwater meeting.
Well, we can have some small group meetings, right?
Yeah, small group meetings.
In the next 3 weeks that some of us can do. I mean, I might be the only one that can't come to the 11th meeting.
July 11th.
July 11th, yeah.
I was thinking we wanted to move it along faster than that.
Well, at least on the mini meetings.
Well, the mini meetings next week, but then.
I can do other nights on that week.
Well, and maybe limit the agenda to just stormwater if we need to, or maybe we can make it a general meeting, I don't know.
What was your sense? I think we sort of talked about how this might move forward between us and the city council. I'm sure they're going to go into some kind of a summer schedule also.
I believe that during July and August they meet once a month, if I remember correctly. I have not seen a schedule, year-long schedule, so I don't know exactly what days they may not have July and August.
Gary, I do recall Paul Spector commenting that July and August weren't good months to do this.
So this might not happen until September. Some kind of a joint.
But that doesn't mean that we can do our homework between now and then and keep talking and refining the specifics, how do we put it, the must, the could, the need.
Must, ought, and like.
Wanna.
And get that straight in our mind, have the objective that by the 1st of August, maybe we would have that clear.
All right, so the next meeting on the 27th is undersubscribed at the moment. So maybe we could cancel that meeting, because we just take a second to talk about our summer schedule.
Do we want to advance the next meeting to next week? Or is that too much?
I'm not sure.
No.
And I'm not,
Is
and
there a knife
yeah,
there?
and in all honesty, I'm not sure how much further ahead I would have gotten on this in the space of 1 week, so that's just me.
A month or so gives us plenty of time to generate. Another piece of this that I haven't really talked about is, I think we need to create a more specific executive summary that's really targeted at informing the Gazette, the City Council, and the public at large of exactly how this looks to us, where we think we're going with it. And at that point, Jim and Ned and I have talked about creating graphs that show what we actually have to do, presenting the information in a way that's digestible and can be talked about at the Look restaurant clearly and accurately.
And I think it would really behoove us to have that ready when we start talking broadly about, the fact that we're already on, Mike, but that boat has sailed on what we're going to do.
And so I think next week, for example, it was too soon to get all that pulled together, but the first meeting in July, I think we could certainly have had time for the small group meetings and for preparing that costs that reflect what we think makes sense, as opposed to what CDM was just throwing together as for purposes of illustration. Does that sound practical, Ned, Jim?
I believe so.
Would you approach it differently?
I think it's the fine approach that you just laid out.
Oh, come on, a little enthusiasm.
What do you think, Doug?
I think it sounds good. I think you guys, there's a lot to know.
Okay. All right, yeah, so you agree. We could use a few weeks to put this together. and to
And
create space for
I'm
some
happy
small
to help in
meetings.
any way or answer any questions.
I'm just trying to agree on a process that sounds right. Okay.
So
So
we're
then-
gonna cancel the next meeting.
Well, I thought, even after I said that, let's just take a second, finish this discussion, and then we'll do the summer schedule.
Right.
But I think yes.
So the procedure for setting up the small group meetings, is Jim sending us an email with possible meeting times maybe? How we did it before?
We did,
You set some slots and then we
Yeah.
signed up for them,
that's correct.
Fine.
We did a little doodle calendar on that.
which we couldn't alter once we do it.
We can do it by emails if you like, otherwise.
I like
It's
the
fine.
doodle.
We like to do.
Good work.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so I think we're good on this for now. You wanna take a second and talk about the meetings in July and August?
Could I add one more comment?
Mhm.
It might be clear in Jim and Ned's mind what's gonna happen in the small group meeting, but I guess I would like a sense of, how priorities would be set for this and have that be a sort of a focus of those meetings. If that's possible. Is that too detailed?
So in a sense, this goes back to must,
Yeah.
should, could.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's,
Well, go ahead.
yeah, I mean, definitely, I think there's not gonna be a lot of mulling over the priorities, because the first couple of years, those are gonna fall out in about 2 minutes, so
Right,
I'd recommend that everybody bring comments and questions if there are other things about
right,
the utility arrangement or how it would be set up, or whatever the comments are on the document. We'll be happy to work through those, but the first couple of years, it's gonna be pretty clear, what the obligations are, and then from there, it would be like the other utilities, the board would decide what the priorities are and what must or whatever needs to happen.
Okay, thank you.
I was hoping to get an opportunity to go over the questions that I came up with as I went through the report.
Yeah,
That's really
understand
why
that
I
too.
wanted it.
Okay, you're saying that, and if we could maybe get to the other, but then
Oh, yeah.
start with the
I
questions.
just don't want
Okay.
your gender to exclude that.
Okay, well,
Mike comes in with real concrete. Page
I
15,
know, I wanna
paragraph
be-
4,
I like
sentence
being
3.
engaged.
Yeah,
Yes,
I'm
I-
thinking the
I
same
was
thing.
just
I know which meeting I want to
I
sign
wait
up
till
maybe
for.
he can come to all of them.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that'd be great.
All right, I think that sounds like a plan. And I think the,
Sorry.
no, I think we should not start the small group meetings until there's been a chance to start putting together numbers that are more reflective of that, what we should do, what we have to do, and bar graphs and ERUs that are reflective of what we must do. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So, a little bit of, a week or
Staff
10, a couple of weeks or a week, just to get that together so that the meeting is more on point, rather than talking about what CDM came up with for possible expenses.
Agreed.
Okay, summer schedule.
Please don't schedule all of the opportunities the week of the 24th, because I'm out of town for that week, the week of
24th.
Last week.
the last week of June. So if I
Well,
can make
speaking
the-
of then, so we're gonna cancel that meeting.
Yes.
Then in July, how's the 11th look?
Good.
Good.
Just not,
And is your problem the whole week or that day?
the whole week.
So we'll leave the 11th as it's usually scheduled? And then skip the 25th?
Yes, I can't make the 25th anymore.
Any chance we could do the 18th instead of the 11th? Or is that gonna be bad for everybody?
Do-
It's okay with me.
What's wrong?
Nothing, continue.
So Ro is saying, could we, if we're just doing one meeting, could it be the 18th? It's fine with me.
Okay.
Okay.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Only 'cause we love you.
Thank you. You were the one that bought the cupcake.
Okay,
I know, but I don't have a kitchen, so I can't.
July on the 18th. Then everyone will be there.
Jim pursed his lips, what does that mean?
He won't tell us, it's a secret up there.
I'll tell you later.
What?
It's his birthday.
Oh,
sweet. More cupcakes.
Excuse me.
did you hear about that?
No, is it really your birthday?
What happened?
I lied.
Someone wants to bring cupcakes.
Jim's birthday.
Wait, can I read something?
I think we can submit it.
Would this be inappropriate?
Well, let's just finish the discussion. Alright, so
Okay,
then we're
so
into
the
July,
discussion.
August.
Worries me that you're looking through the stormwater report and asking
If
if
it's appropriate.
public
I have to
document.
finish.
Okay, are we talking about August?
August, 8th,
I'm good.
gone. 15th,
Good.
Good.
good. Good. 15th,
Jim's birthday.
Again?
his wife's birthday,
Okay, so no 8th
correct,
and no 22nd, just 15th.
Just the 15th.
correct. Alright, nicely done.
Okay, July 18th, August 15th.
Okay. Contract for gaseous chlorine to JCI Jones Chemicals in the amount of $33,750.
Move approval.
This is our annual contract for gaseous chlorine at the wastewater treatment plant. Last year it was $700 a ton, this year it was $750 per ton. Thank you, Doug.
Thanks, Doug.
We only had one bidder on this, which was JCI Jones Chemical.
Motion to approve?
Then moved.
Oh, comments, thoughts? All in favor?
Aye.
Contract for sodium hydroxide to Univar in the amount not to exceed $24,900.
Move approval.
Second.
This is our annual contract for dealing with odor control at the wastewater treatment plant. Very interesting bidding this year. We did have 3 bids. Univar was low at $1.51 per gallon, and Crevitt and Boynton and Remington were well over $2.70 per gallon. So their competition undercut them by well over $1.20
Wow.
a gallon, which surprised us.
We don't know who it is.
We have never dealt with Univar, but they're probably meet our specifications.
Could we have recommendations of other people that have worked with?
We don't know.
Well, alright. Any comments or questions? Mike?
What was the price last year, do you know?
Last year was $2.75 a gallon.
Wow.
Same concentration?
Yes.
Supposedly.
My understanding that when we did the bid openings on this, I think it was Remington was here, and they had mentioned something about that. Univar's been undercutting everybody everywhere this year.
Alright.
What do we know about them?
They are at 175 Terminal Road in Providence, Rhode Island. I asked John Carver, chief operator of the plant, that when the bid's awarded, we start having their product come in, just make sure it is functioning properly before we make a large order, so that we make sure that even though it supposedly meets our specifications, that it will
Sure.
work reducing odor at the plant.
And can we, I mean, I don't wanna, is there a stockpiling? Is this a chemical that can be stockpiled so that,
We buy it in bulk,
yeah,
so if there's bought in 55-gallon drums.
okay. So a random examination of a 55-gallon drum would work.
Or whatever our first run quantity might be, we might have to do 200 gallons for odor control for a month to
Yeah.
make sure it works. This is also combined with your next line item
Yeah, I
too.
see,
Right,
I
we
see,
saw that.
that's why I'm
Again.
concerned,
And
yeah.
once again, substantial reduction in price.
Nice. Alright, well, all in favor of the contract for sodium hydroxide?
Aye.
Next, contract for sodium hypochlorite, also to Univar, in the amount not to exceed $24,900.
last year's price was $2.56 a gallon, this year it's $1.57. Once again, we did have 3 bidders, Crevitt and Borden and Remington again. Both Crevitt and Borden and Remington were $2.49 and $3.20 per gallon respectively. So this is even $1 cheaper than last year. So it's the same thing, it's worked with the other product for odor control, so that would be the sodium hydroxide. So with the combination of these 2 chemicals coming in, we'll find out how well the product works for us.
So I need a motion.
Move approval.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor of approving the contract for sodium hypochlorite?
Aye.
Contract for native infield mix FOB to Reed Custom Soils in the amount not to exceed $24,900.
Move approval.
Second.
This native infield mix is for typical use on city ball field projects across the city. You'll see that item number 7 is to the same company, but that is FOB delivered, delivered price. And I don't need to speak out of turn on the contracts, but talking with the superintendent, we typically have done this as a combined contract, so we have both values in front of us. Joe Cook, our chief procurement officer, told us that we needed to do separate contracts for FOB versus delivered. The delivered product, is my understanding, is going to be used to reconstruct Mains Field that washed away. And the second contract, FOB, is when we need some material, we go down to Canton and pick it up with a 15 or a 10-wheeler truck. So that's why we have that option for the FOB, so that as we need 10 or 15 yards here for various little projects, we send someone down and bring it back.
Terry,
Yes.
what are the unit prices? By the yard or by the ton?
That's by the ton. Approximately, it was $27.50 a ton FOB.
And is it custom
There's-
soil? Oh, I'm sorry.
There's no other bidders on it.
Does custom soil imply it's got a certain amount of clay in it to make it pack well? Or?
It does. It's got a sand is not to exceed 65.7%, silt is not to exceed 29.8%, clay is not to exceed 4.5%. So there's a specification to it.
So all in favor of approving the contract for infield mix FOB?
Aye.
Next contract for native infield mix delivered, Reed Custom Soils, not to exceed $24,900.
This material price delivered is $47 per ton. And we had no other bidders, though we did put out the bids to 2 other firms, but they did not submit bids.
Discussion? I need a motion, I think.
Move approval.
Second.
All in favor of approving the contract for delivered infield mix?
Aye.
Contract for water testing total coliform to Howard Environmental in the amount not to exceed $24,900.
Move approval.
Second.
This is our annual testing for the water treatment plant and the distribution system.
Piling up here.
Even though Howard Environmental Service was not the low bid, Contest Analytical out of East Long Meadow did have the lowest bid, but they did not meet specifications. Test America Laboratories in Westfield, my understanding that we've had some false positive tests with them in the past, and therefore, because every time we get a false positive test, we have to take a number of additional samples to ensure that we're not going to have to place a boil order on. And so, because of that, we talked to Joe Cook, Chief Procurement Officer, and this is exempt from 30B because it's related to professional services. So he said we could award it to Howard Lab, which we've had great service with over the years, with no false positive results.
Discussion or questions? All in favor of approving the contract for water testing for total coliform?
Aye.
Aye.
Change order number 4 to contract 351-11 for the Town Street reconstruction to Gomes Construction in the amount of $0.
I'll move that. Move approval.
Second.
This change order is for strictly changing extra time to complete the work on change order number 3. Gives the contractor until June 30th to complete the work. That's why it's a $0. It's a time extension.
So extending that. All in favor of extending the time?
Aye.
Contract for the Beacon Street Deep Sanitary lateral replacement to AJ Virgilio in the amount not to exceed $20,037.
Move approval.
Second.
This is a 20-foot deep service that has failed or about ready to fail up on Beacon Street. We cannot provide this service to our customers. Our depths are 10 feet, 11 feet at greatest that we can dig safely and responsibly. So typically, we would award this as an emergency contract. We decided to go as a regular contract because we didn't think the system was going to immediately fail. We'd have gotten to go out to public bidding, typically getting a better price for something this deep. We did have emergency contracts in the past. Even though they were doing the winter of Main Street in Florence, that dig was about 18 feet deep in the middle of the winter, and that was $50,000 to replace that house service. This bid came in at, they were the only bidder on it, and it came in at $20,037.26 to replace this one house service with a vertical chimney over the main.
So that's, I mean, the other was in the winter, but still, this seems a lot better.
It is. That's a deep dig, 20 feet down.
Questions or comments?
Questions?
This is a house service that we're replacing?
Yes. In the layout.
What's a vertical chimney?
Basically, what they do is the main line is down here, and they do a vertical chimney above the pipe, so it comes in at 12 o'clock. And then when they get up to a reasonable height, usually 7 to 6 feet below ground, they tee it off and go to the house.
Mike?
Have we worked with Virgilio before?
We have.
Where are they located?
Westfield.
Oh, yeah. There's Virgilio is not a common name, but there's a contractor in Worcester.
Yep, this one's out of Westfield, Mass.
And there's a realtor, Donna.
With the question.
All in favor of approving the contract?
Aye.
All right, next is a discussion of the, all right, so I'm sure you've followed everything in the newspaper.
Go to the radio.
The city has charged the employee with the brush hog. They have charged him with stealing the brush hog. But in his defense, he raised the fact that he had merely borrowed it, and that there is some precedent for borrowing tools. It turned out that Sam Brindis in the 90s had written a policy. I think you have a copy of it. Yeah. Now, Ned, while he has been superintendent, has never approved the loaning of any public equipment to an employee. And I don't think George Andrikidis did either, or at least there's nothing on record.
I'd like to clarify that.
Yes.
During the course of the conversations with the press, Mr. Crowley and I were talking about large pieces of equipment, backhoes, trucks, trailers, the brush hog, things of that nature. And I told him at that point that we've never approved something like that since I've been director. In the course of this investigation, I did find out this policy existed. Employees did borrow small pieces of equipment to brought home for a day and then bring them back as they needed them. I was told that in the 90s, Sam created this policy as a small perk for department staff due to lack of raises. This is what I've been told. I wasn't here then. So with the new city policy out, and since this investigation started, it's been stopped to everything. There is no borrowing of any city equipment for any reason at all. So what I did was, with the mayor's new policy, I did ask for that the policy that was provided by Mr. Brindis in 1997 be rescinded by the board. And therefore, it's no longer on the books any way, shape, or form.
And then the mayor's policy would become the governing policy.
That's correct.
I make a motion that we rescind the 1997 DPW policy regarding city property.
Second. Any further discussion? All in favor of rescinding the 1997 policy?
Alright,
Okay.
thank you.
Now, the second thing is, you know, it might strike one. How was it that this fairly large piece of equipment had been missing for some amount of time, approaching perhaps as much as 2 years, and that fact that it was missing hadn't been noticed? In the defense of the department, apparently this piece of equipment has not proved to be useful for the purpose that it was purchased for. And in fact, it's been replaced by another piece of equipment that works much better. So I believe it's fair to say it was sitting in a pile of weeds somewhere.
It was sitting out in back of the water department.
Yeah. But it does make you wonder whether perhaps we need some kind of a policy regarding an inventory of the large equipment and some kind of a mechanism whereby that inventory is refreshed on a regular basis, so that this could have been caught in the process of just working through the ordinary day-to-day method of doing business.
Well, the other reason for doing something like that is that there's an aftermarket for this stuff, and if we're carrying surplus equipment that has capital value, and we're not utilizing it, we want to be aware of that so that we can find a good home for it, because there's always going to be a town that's broker than we are. So I think there are a lot of good reasons to do this.
I totally agree with you in terms of the aspect of accountability. I don't know how we determine at what level you stop taking inventory. I would say all inventory should be summarized on a regular basis. It's just that the size might determine how often. But I really feel that the level we've seen in the past, and this is before your time, where equipment has been turned over and we have gotten some monetary value out of it. In fact, like a 1970 truck or something that we turned in and got some money for to do something. I forget the exact amount, but the fact that we can't afford to not use be respectful of taxpayers' money and let anything sit there without our knowing what the status is.
So staff, as superintendent's been asked to do inventories of not all nuts and bolts, but basically equipment, power drills to still saws to anything that would probably been used in the past policy, and create that so we have that. The question is it a quarterly inventory or 6 months? That's what we haven't decided yet, and trying to craft some policy for the board also to look at on that.
Right.
What about size? I mean, dollar value or size?
It's more, the typical things we have are, you know, if you look at the smaller scale, there's some drills, there's some chainsaws, weed whackers, leaf blowers, things of that nature. The bigger equipment, we know what our bigger equipment is. It's all inventoried. Our portable radios and mobile radios were just inventoried for the new narrow broadband that's coming up at the end of the year, so that we can determine what radios need to be replaced for compliance with that. So we do have quite a bit of inventory lists. It's not going to take long, I think, for the superintendents to create those inventory lists of the smaller type things that I just said.
So the staff is going to work on. You'll be getting back to us with a proposal of what a good schedule might be for doing a revising. What's the right word? Updating inventory.
I don't know, a quarter or 6 months seems. Thank you. I heard excessive too often. So I'm just throwing that out there. But I'm also wondering if you have such a great GIS system that there are ways of maybe, this might be too expensive, but of keeping track of equipment through
Barcodes.
Chips. You've been watching that TV commercial.
No, probably not. But I was thinking barcodes or whatever, just to the same way people just take a handheld mechanism and do inventory in a store or whatever, just throwing that out for.
Our ViewWorks program that we have bought into for obviously service calls and work orders and looking at it for asset management going forward does have those capabilities. It's buying additional modules and things of that nature. Where I typically have seen that used or heard about or read about it is larger departments or school departments where they're interloaning the equipment to other schools and they're tracking it that way. But they're talking larger cities than at least what I believe our equipment we have at the Department of Public Works. I'm not sure how the school tracks their equipment as they move projectors around or projector tape. I really don't know. I can find that out also. You were talking about GPS, that's really a tracking mechanism, is where this piece of item is. I would love to put GPS tracking on all our vehicles, so I could know exactly where they are, especially during plow events. And every time I try to do it, we have no money to do it.
I understand.
But the technology is there.
And getting cheaper.
It is.
So that's a coming attraction.
So, you know, in general, just so the board knows, it did pain me what came out of this. The investigation was swift. We did what we needed to do to get the employees out of here on leave. One has resigned, the other one was discharged. And looking forward to move this department forward and get over this setback that we had.
Yeah, I mean, it is tough. I think we can all see how much effort Ned and Jim and guys like Doug or Karen McQuillan or all of these people, the kind of effort they're putting into making this thing go and work well. And an event like this is just undermines public confidence in this.
Yes, it does.
Okay, well I think except for private ways, that pretty much wraps things up. I think as far as private ways, all I would say is at the joint committee meeting the other day, we talked about it quite a bit. We have emailed to the joint committee copies of the relevant statutes governing this. Everyone agrees that they seem fairly clear cut. It is worth noting that the amount of money we're spending to remove snow and ice from private ways is modest. It's $12,000, $13,000 a year. But it feels like it's moving forward. It's going to be a royal pain in the neck, I think, for such a small amount of money. It'll cost much more to fix the problem than we would save by just. And in fact, some people at the joint committee meeting were saying, let's just put this on the ballot. I mean, it's peanuts. And that would perhaps alleviate the problem.
What would be put on the ballot?
The statute specifies the wording, but basically the voters would be asked to approve the expense of public money to plow and de-ice private property.
And the low dollar amount would really augment that, make it attractive.
Right.
Or less unattractive.
There are perhaps a little fewer, somewhat fewer than 50 private ways in the city that would be worth discussing, and at least 25 of them look like an ordinary road.
Would we risk other people wanting to be part of that snow removal?
That's an interesting question.
You mean just a driveway?
No.
I think
Or what do
no,
you mean by other people?
Well, I mean, there are other.
A condo complex, for
Right.
example, said,
Yes.
well, hey,
It's not a private way.
Well, for instance, I live on a road that's fronted by 3 homes that is, you could call it a driveway or you could call it a private way, and maybe we would like to be part of that. I'm not saying that at all, I'm just saying it, I'm using it as an example.
I see where this is going.
No, I'm thinking about, I don't wanna have something put on the ballot and then it actually prompts more problems in terms of private way issues because people wanna be part of the private
Right.
ways.
I think straightening it out would be a much bigger problem than
I understand,
13,000 or 26,000
I understand,
or more.
but we don't wanna add people to the list either.
But I think that we mean, these are roads that we're currently plowing.
Yes.
And we could be clear of that. But there's some we should not be plowing either.
Well, in any event, the problem has hardly been resolved, but it's still getting attention.
Okay.
That's it.
Has the city council, city attorney come up with a clear recipe as to how to fix it if we did choose to
No, he
try to
keeps
fix it?
threatening to, and I'm looking forward to it, but I haven't received anything yet.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a real mess. I don't think it's easy to fix.
No, and I think it's gonna be expensive to fix. I think that's, and the question is, does the city bear that cost, or do we assess that back to the property owners or impact?
At the moment, the thought is it would be back to the property owners.
I don't know if this stack is here.
Oh, it's a change order. I make a motion, we adjourn.
Oh!
Oh, we have to go around. No, people may have a thought or two. Chris, was there anything else you wanted to mention?
No, other than the other thing that I talked to Paul about when I was walking the dog, but it's come up there, was that their desire to do some form of presentation to highlight the importance of the work that BPW does. And something that would be sponsored by the city council rather than DPW, but to bring in our expertise and Ned and Jim and their crew's expertise to help tell that story. And I think that plays, I don't know what level of discussion he got to you on this, or actually I think he also said he was talking to Bill Dwight. And it seems to me that it's timely as we start to think about how we're going to be making the case, not just for the sewer and water increases, but the new things, the new initiatives. That it might be nice to put together a package of this. That was just something. The other thing I was going to talk about was the great plastic exchange, but I can do that. So,
Mike?
I'd like to know if staff would want to comment on the forest stewardship plan that we have in front of us, whether it's just for our information or what we're supposed to do with it.
I'd be happy to address that, Mike.
Excellent.
And a little flurry of silent activity down here a few minutes ago is related to this package, in fact, that's in front of you. Our ACE, Senior Environmental Scientist Nicole Sanford, has been working very busily on forest stewardship plans for the city's watershed properties. She's been working with our consulting forester, Mike Maury, on these stewardship plans. We have a deadline with the Department of Conservation and Recreation to file these stewardship plans by the end of June in order to meet a grant deadline obligation. It turns out that DCR is paying about $21,000 of the $35,000 contract that we were encumbered here to do the work. You'll note in Nicole's memo when you read it that she was seeking board approval of the content of the stewardship plans prior to submittal. So my little flurry of activity a few minutes ago was when the board canceled the meeting where we were going to ask for said approval. I called Nicole at her home and wasn't able to get in touch with her, but I had a vague recollection from previous discussions that we are under no definitive obligations when we submit these forest stewardship plans, and if there's something in the plans that the board disagrees with in terms of policy-related matters that you may want to weigh in on, we are able to make changes to the stewardship plans moving forward. So what I'd like to do is ask that the board review Nicole's memo, review the draft stewardship plans as they were in your package here tonight. We'll talk with you at the next board meeting and seek your concurrence and approval of the contents of the stewardship plan. The heart of the stewardship plan really gets to the goals for land management for the property that we own in terms of protecting the city's water supply, different management activities that we're going to do, such as logging or the forestry activities, control of invasives, other management things that we need to do in the long term to protect the city's water. So it's important, I think there's some policy things in there. The forest stewardship plans as they're ultimately approved by DCR and as an obligation of the grant that we're receiving, do have some public outreach components to them, public education, some other things that you'll see that are in here in terms of things like guided walks or presentations or other outreach, so people know the city the property owns and how we're managing it and why we're managing it in the ways that we are. So that was really all I had to say about it. So happy to answer any questions or happy reading otherwise. And I will have Nicole at the next meeting. She's the one that's been working on this. We had planned on having the forester here as well, who could answer more technical questions that may come up in regard to land management activities.
So on the July 18th meeting, we'll be discussing this.
So we're clear that we're not facing this June 30th deadline.
We are facing the June 30th deadline, but we have the ability to modify any statements in the stewardship plans as they may relate to policy that the board wants to approve.
Okay, so
It's a living document.
we should tonight approve these.
I don't think
I
you
don't
need
think
to
so.
approve
I don't
them.
think we can,
Don't need to.
because it wasn't on the agenda.
Oh,
I think we just,
But they can file it without our
oh, they
approval.
can file, okay.
That is,
Okay, they, got it, okay, misunderstood. That you need a board approval to file. But you're saying you do.
no,
we do not need it. No.
Does that answer your question, Mike?
yes, quite completely.
Excellent discussion. Ned?
A couple things here. I thought I'd throw in your board package, some fun things I got to read while looking for easements on sewer lines on Isabella Street and other places in the city. And there's two letters, one in 1910 from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that allows our discharge to the Connecticut River, or the Mill River, of all the city sewage without treatment. And then a 1940 letter from the Commonwealth that says, well, you know, I know you're working on getting to the Connecticut River, but let's get it out of the Mill River.
Get it to the big one.
Pollution is, how's the saying go? The answer to
Dilution.
pollution is dilution, so.
Dilution's the
Anyways,
solution.
I thought it was very interesting that we had these permissions to do that, and I thought I'd share it with you as we go through this whole thing of asset management and the huge cost of fixing our infrastructure going forward.
So we used to dump it into the Mill River.
1910.
And we'd wait for a good rainstorm to flush it.
The Mill River was probably deeper then.
But it went through parts of downtown.
It did.
Yeah.
It was
And people
basically a
used to swim
cesspool.
in it.
We did projects in the 70s that took houses from discharging to rivers and put them into a sewer system in the 70s.
When did Williamsburg stop dumping?
In the 70s.
Yeah. Jim?
But it wasn't just Williamsburg, was it?
I know, but
Conway,
Mill
that was
River, that's-
I was involved in a lawsuit in Conway. People were dumping into the river and were fighting the requirement that they changed. This is in the early 70s.
To this day, we're still finding illicit connections from mobile parts of town of discharging in the Mill River, so it's clearly part of, I mean, it's clearly a problem and part of what we, the work that we do every day.
Did CDM find evidence when they were doing their?
It's work that Doug has been doing independently with us and working with the Connecticut River Watershed, and some work actually that came out of the comprehensive wastewater management plan that SEA is doing, so there's a number of different fronts in terms of the way samples are taken and followed up on, but I mean, in the last year, we've found, I don't know, 2 or 3 of them or something that we've worked on, so, yeah, I mean, to this day, it's something we continue to work on.
Okay. Anything else, Jim? Or, no, Ned, are you
The
done?
only thing else I just want to say, thanks to Jim and Doug McDonald, who did just a tremendous amount of work on this utility report.
Yeah.
They buried themselves in it. I've been buried with other things, but they really, even though it's a little bit later than we thought it would be, it's concise, it's complete, and I like to see things move forward, so hats off to them.
Yeah, I would add to that Jim worked really hard in shaping the final report. What CDM created was somewhat less than what you've received.
But not as bad as Stantec, I hope.
On the CDM, what was the resolution on the overcharge or the charge they were seeking on the previous contract?
We are waiting for something in writing from Kent Rush McKee in regard to their request for additional money for work on the stormwater plan.
Sounds like it died.
Well, I think in fairness to them, they felt like it was inappropriate to be asking for more money until they were sure that we had a product that was acceptable and that the project was done. And now that that's done, they said that they're working on a letter to submit to Ned and I for consideration for the board. So the document's done, and I think they'll be wanting to have that discussion.
All set? Jim, anything you wanted to? Okay, BJ? MJ? No? Okay, great. So I believe MJ has suggested, has moved that we adjourn?
Yes, and I'll move through, right. Move to adjourn?
All in favor?
Aye.
Great, thanks guys.
Thank you.